As someone who really enjoyed watching Squid Game and what was effectively my first time watching Korean drama, I'm really annoyed with the franchiseification of Squid Game from Netflix. There's been memes, some discourse about the dub and subs, and a lot of misunderstanding about the show and its characters, but Squid Game itself remains a very good watch. But it's incredibly damning when the corporation backing the show, Netflix, wants to make an adaptation and misses the point even more so than its viewers. Mr. Beast, no matter how big he is, doesn't rival a huge media conglomerate in his videos. It just tends to prove that the people that fund the show have worse media literacy than some of the loudest critics of the show. You might be asking, what part do I have in this discussion? I'm just a nerd. Well, people who are interested in death game content are nerds. And around the time Squid Game was released, another piece of media was made to stream for North American audiences for the first time. Kamen Rider Ryuki. It's impossible to ignore the context of the world that made both these shows, especially Squid Game. While Kamen Rider and Ryuki and Squid Game are pieces of entertainment that will inevitably be commercialized, it is important to remember the underlying message of both these shows, especially when seeing where they overlap. In the case of Kamen Rider Ryuki, I'll just be blunt. 9/11's impact on the world was a key factor in the show existing. People should realize that an event like this changed the world, and that it wasn't solely Americans being affected by it. The show either could have been much different, or could not have existed at all, as Shinichiro Shirakura, Toei's main producer who currently oversees Kamen Rider, was ready to stop after the show's previous entry, Akito. So in an effort to teach people what it really meant to be a hero, it decided that the late Shotaro Ishinomori would have wanted to explore himself. Kamen Rider Ryuki's protagonist, Shinji Kido, naively gets wrapped up into the series' death game, the Rider War, for the sake of helping and protecting others, heavily contrasting against everyone else who is fighting for themselves and the chance to get a single wish. Ren Akiyama wants to save his dying girlfriend. Shuichi Kitaoka wants to be immortal to save himself from a terminal illness. And the deranged, manipulative, and chilling Takeshi Asakura kills for the sake of it, and wants to infinitely prolong the Rider War so he can relish in the violence. Shinji is the only one who doesn't have a selfish reason to fight, but when contrasted against everyone else, he feels like he doesn't have any reason. And the moral grayness increases as the show prolongs and the world beyond the mirrors and all the monsters that inhabit it begin to wreak more havoc in our world. Not to mention the person who orchestrated this to begin with, Shiro Kanzaki, is a tragic villain who wanted to save his sister. Allegiances are made, but none of which are permanent, and there are even good guys who are also morally grey, like Shiro's former classmates participating, wanting to kill Yui, Shiro's sister, to protect everyone else, saying that sacrificing one life for the sake of everyone else is justifiable. No matter what, the fighting feels aimless, the brutality is felt, and for someone who's naive and ultimately well-meaning like Shinji, it's an emotional toll, and he just wants everyone to get along. Life isn't like that. War isn't like that. As someone too young to remember 9/11 but was raised in a world molded by it, the more you learn about war from a young age, the more you wish everyone could get along. As you get older though, you either become apathetic, see it as a necessary evil, or strongly detest it. Alternatively, you glorify if you're that morally bankrupt, or you simply just do not realize or know the effects of war. All these perspectives are seen in different characters in Ryuki. Some of them don't even want to participate but put on a mask in order to not think about what's actually being done. Kitaoka and Ren can both be ruthless in this regard, and both of them butt heads with Shinji, who not only has pure intent, but lets his intent be known and generally wants to see the best in everyone, compared to other Rider War participants who see everyone as a potential enemy. No matter what, even if we get what we want, those who participate in war are simply pawns to people who have their own agenda, and people who realize what they've done to get to this point have to live with the consequences, and it affects their souls. The thing is, the message is subtle, but the show itself isn't. If you're a child or just someone who wants karate bugmen, you don't have to view the show through this lens. Hell, despite being a well-written kids show, it is a kids show, and being so overly analytical can rob you of enjoying it. Some of the comedic moments are explicitly made so you don't take it so seriously. At the same time, knowing the context of how the show was made and seeing it how it connects to the show's main plot and its characters can help older viewers and those not initiated with this genre to respect it more than simply a bunch of dudes in plastic suits beating each other up with trading cards. Hell, it's never a fun time when the world of Ryuki is revisited in movies, TV specials, or reunions. War is the main idea behind it. It isn't a happy show where the heroes all team up together. Everyone has different reasons for participating in this game, and are willing to do whatever and betray or even kill each other just to get ahead, whether or not they know they are being taken advantage of or seeing simple entertainment. And when you look at Ryuki through this lens, it's incredibly easy to see comparisons to Squid Game, and how capitalism is the root of all evil. Squid Game came from much more humble beginnings. The creator, Wang Dong-hyuk, was developing this idea since the late 2000s, but nobody picked it up because the idea seemed far too out there. In essence, the main premise was inspired by Wang's own experiences of living under capitalist society, being low on finances, and other media in the death game genre like kaiji. Squid Game obviously isn't meant for children, but if you really want to draw comparisons, the idea of a mastermind orchestrating a game full of desperate out-of-luck people pushed to the brink in order to achieve their own desires runs through both properties. Hell, you even have one of the main organizers of the game basically running on God mode to make it more entertaining. Shirakanzaki and the Old Man are certainly interesting characters to say the least, but I'm getting ahead of myself. These comparisons aren't meant to be the faces of the video, but more to explain how there are comparisons between both shows. We know Shinji Kido is an idiot, but he has a good heart and no desire to be desperate enough to succumb to the inevitable pressure to fall into the selfish desire of the Rider War. He's going to help people, and he's going to help his fellow riders. Ji-hoon is a complicated character in comparison, but still gives off these schlubby, dorky vibes. And what makes both of these characters comparable is their desire to jump into this game with no forward thinking. And while the experience humbled them, it did end up driving them crazy for a bit, unable to cope with just how bad war and human greed really are. Ji-hoon is shown to be selfish though, but what he chooses to do with his money prevents him from being seen as someone who's irredeemable. He's someone who wants to do the right thing in his own way. While Shinji naively detests the idea of being brutal like others, Ji-hoon is selfish at start because he's human. We're not completely evil or good to start. The world around us drives us to make decisions to survive. So while it's a dumb decision to get money from horse betting or getting a loan from the mafia, he does want to help his mother and win the respect of his daughter. Him generally wanting to keep people together and cooperate, even with people who butted heads with him on the outside world like Se-byuk, shows that we are all capable of good things. Both Shinji and Ji-hoon's genuine desires to embrace teamwork and allyship in the circumstances that they have to deal with keep them grounded and likable, in spite of Shinji's foolishness and Ji-hoon's own moral shortcomings. However, once Ji-hoon won that blood money, what does he have to show for it? Was any of it worth it? Sang-woo became more cold and calculated over the course of the games because he was fighting for his life after being placed in exorbitant amounts of debt, caring about the others less and less. And with Ren, considering his relationship with Eri, I have every reason to believe that he was a much happier person before the Rider War made him jaded and willing to kill anyone who stood in his way of wanting to revive her. Despite the persona he puts on to fool everyone including himself into thinking he has no qualms of killing, Shinji can see right through the true intent of the Rider War and Ren's heart, and fights till the end for him to see that the ends truly do not justify the means. And he'll do whatever it takes to make him see this, no matter how much Ren rejects Shinji and his ideas. It's why the scene when both of them gain the Survive armor and engulfed in fire is such an iconic scene of the whole show. Two people in the same situation, but vastly different ideas, staring each other down, knowing that the other has the capacity to kill them. And while the first Survive mode Henshin has both Ren and Shinji, their suits engulfed in passionate red flames, the final game where Ji-hoon and Sang-woo are fighting to the death has them bathed in dreary, depressing, murky blue hues of rain. Nobody truly wins at the end of the day. In spite of how these stories differ, The main thesis, again, is to see what drives ordinary people to embrace their most primal urges. Do you reject your dignity and embrace these circumstances? Do you embrace a system that causes visible harm to all who participate in it that you know is wrong just for a chance to make things better for yourself? Or do you stick to your morals, knowing that things will likely be hard if you survive, just because you know deep inside things should and can be better? So now let's address the elephant in the room. The VIPs are us. We see the people fighting for their lives and we see it as sport. No, entertainment. Now this isn't to say that you, me, and Joe Schmo who are watching this, who are likely struggling in circumstances like the contestants, are helping the system that makes the game continue. We are all pawns. In reality, the VIPs are the elites that keep us in the positions that we're in. It's in their control to make things better for everyone, but they don't. We could get universal health care, or a higher minimum wage, or even just keeping everything in fiction. I really do think that every contestant could have gotten all the money they needed without having to compete. Nobody had to die. But in the VIP's eyes, what's the point of a game without stakes? Admittedly, I'm conflating the desires of media conglomerates with people in positions of power, but hey, tomato tomato. There's always the idea of no ethical consumption under capitalism. We're kind of forced to have capitalism as a driving force in our lives, even though we know that its effects are killing us. We have to survive any way we can. So just the idea that Netflix can take what is obviously a dark satire on capitalism and how it forces ordinary people to participate in a game where nobody wins but the people who made the rules to begin with, and turn it into a game show that almost glorifies the idea. Say what you will about Kamen Rider Ryuki being nothing but a toy commercial for kids, it absolutely is. And I don't think it's directly critiquing capitalism either. But again, it doesn't show the Rider War as something good. While you as a fan, young or old, can enjoy it on a surface level, knowing that something like this wouldn't happen in real life, well, with the mirror monsters and everything, the fairly grounded desires of people who participate or what make Ryuki interesting to analyze as someone outside the target demo. It told people the importance of being a hero, and didn't pull its punches on just how an individual's morality can range on a spectrum instead of flat out being good or evil, and how that can change based on the world around them. Meanwhile, Netflix wants to franchisify something that they didn't have to spend nearly as much money on, thanks to importing a show rather than making it in America. They don't want heartfelt stories, they want icons to market and metrics to milk. And while Kamen Rider Ryuki is 20 years old, people are still talking about it, and there's still new perspectives to be gained through analyzing it along with any other piece of media. But with Squid Game, something that is still fairly new, it went from a heartfelt story to an intellectual property almost overnight. And it wasn't even because of the creators' values, but the people who gave them the platform to begin with. I'm not too worried that Season 2 will dial back on the anti-capitalist nature, but it's sadly possible, which sucks because you expect an adult show to not hold back. No matter how Season 2 ends up, the game show will leave a sour taste in everyone's mouths, and may negatively taint people's perception of Squid Game regardless of the quality in next season. And that's a shame, but it's also inevitable when most people only consume media on a surface level, and people who make the media almost count on that.
I think a lot of the people who really related to Squid Game and really loved it, they also experienced some kind of hurt because of economic troubles or some violence that they experienced from someone else. And I think the reason they were able to relate to the story was the key for the success of the show. And so when we look at the violence and the level of violence that's depicted in the show, it really contains a message of wanting to retrieve back the humanity that we lost in this extremely competitive society. And so I feel that it, rather compared to the very real and extreme violent society that we live in, it's not as cruel.